and welcome back to the Cover 3 podcast here on CBS Sports. That's Danny Cannell, that's Bud Elliott, that's Tom Fornelli. I'm Chip Patterson, coming to you live at CBS Sports Network, where we are privileged to join you on Tuesdays to get you set for the week ahead in the Big Ten. It's a big show. It's a big time, and it's going to be a season unlike any other in the conference. We are fired up for everything that we're going to do across the next hour, include getting you set for the season as a whole. In a unique way, we are going to draft our Big Ten title game participants. We are also going to look at some of the biggest matchups with Cover 3 style with a little big game breakdown. But we got to begin with the very first Big Ten on CBS of 2024. And it's so big, it's a daggum doubleheader. So we'll have Akron at Ohio State. That's 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. And then following that, we've got UCLA heading out to go play Hawaii. So let's begin with those rock star Buckeyes. And we can save predictions for another show. No, let's have a conversation here, because what I want to know is what you're looking for. So, Tom, why don't you get us started? Danny, then Bud. What are you looking to see out of Ohio State in this season debut?
Yeah, I don't think we're going to learn a whole heck of a lot about the Buckeyes in this game, considering they are 50-point favorites going into it. And I think that in the last 3 meetings, Akron has scored 9 points combined. So I think it's safe to say Ohio State's going to win this game. I think what's going to be the most interesting aspect to me, though, is we're very likely to see the Buckeyes use more than one quarterback in the game. Will Howard will start. We know that. He's the transfer from Kansas State. He was brought in to be the starter. But they also have a very talented quarterback room behind him, and this was a quarterback battle that, if it's to be believed, went quite deep into camp, into the fall, before Will Howard won the starting job. So when the Buckeyes go to their backup quarterback, who's coming out first? Is it going to be Devin Brown, Julian Sayin, Lincoln Kindhole, somebody else? It will give us an idea of what this depth chart actually looks like and what we should probably be looking forward to if, in case, Will Howard gets hurt at some point, because based on his size and his style of play, we know they're going to be running him a lot. So there is a chance he could get banged up. So in a game in which I don't expect there to be a whole lot of late drama, that's the one thing I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, there's a ton I can't wait to look at this new look Buckeyes team. I mean, don't forget, in addition to the portal moves, they also brought in one Chip Kelly from UCLA off the head coaching sideline to be their offensive coordinator. I am very curious to see what his offense looks like. And even more specifically, what do the running backs look like? Tom, you mentioned the quarterbacks. Will Howard's going to run the football. I think that's going to be a presence. How much do they show? But then what's the split between Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson? Are they different roles? Are they on the field at the same time? And even the dynamic possibility of bringing Caleb Downs, one of the biggest gets on the defensive side of the ball, over on the offensive side of the ball. Do they sprinkle that in just for a couple looks to make sure everybody on their schedule sees it and has to prepare for it? I think that's one of the more interesting dynamics of this offense. The running back room, the rotation, and more importantly, how deep do they go, and do they pull that talented sophomore sensation from the defensive side of the ball over to the offense?
Danny, I think you nailed it. I'm going to expand on that Chip Kelly thing. I do want to slip in a mention here. Jeremiah Smith, the best receiver recruit we've seen probably since Julio Jones. But expanding on that Chip Kelly point, we know he's going to bring that quarterback run game. Ryan Day's already kind of discussed that. That's the reason why you go and get Will Howard. Is he going to bring that pace with him? The pace that he ran at Oregon, the pace that he liked to run at UCLA? I'm not expecting Ohio State to be hammered down and pace for 60 minutes, but do they break it out just to practice a little bit in the game and see how they operate if they do want to have a tempo element? I'm interested there.
Well, you don't have a scenario that some teams will have. Like we know that Michigan is going to be heavily favored against against Fresno State. Texas heavily favored against Colorado State. They play each other in week 2. Ohio State's got a nice little ramp up. I want to see it all, baby. I want to see all the snap counts for Quinshon Judkins. I want to see all the snap counts for Travion Henderson. I want to see the different ways that they're using Will Howard in the run game. I want to see how deep we get in that wide receiver room, because you also have those players that we've been excited about. So much focus on Marvin Harrison Jr., and we know Emeka Egbuka is just a rock of stability. But what about that Carnell Tate? What about Brandon Ennis? What about, as Bud mentioned, Jeremiah Smith? there's a lot of different ways for the Ohio State offense to be able to pick you apart. I want to see the choices that they make, because there's not really an opponent or a monster awaiting them in week 2 or week 3 that says, hey, we've got to like keep things close to the vest. So I think Ohio State, and get creative with it, Chip. All right. I want you to go deep in the playbook, get everybody scared, shaking in their boots across the Big Ten. No reason to hold back in the debut. And none of us mentioned the defense, but can we all assume that Ohio State's probably going to hold them to single digits? Does that sound right?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll be shocked if they get across half field.
Yeah. It's going to be tough sledding for the Zips offense as they go up against the Silver Bullets, which should be locked, stocked, and ready to go. Okay, so that'll be 3:30 p.m. Eastern time. Also want to be able to, start to dig into the debut of the Deshaun Foster era at UCLA. We had a great visit with him here on CBS Sports Network when he joined the Cover 3 desk. He gave us an insight into some of the off-field operation, some of the things he was really excited about on the field. But I'll throw back to you first, maybe Danny, then Tom. But what are you excited to see? What are you looking to see from the Bruins as they make their debut against a Hawaii team that already is 1-0 in the Mountain West standings?
Chip, that's easy. Pass rush. Latu is gone. Both the Murphy twins are gone. Gary Smith's been banged up. Do they have any pass rush on this team? Last year, this UCLA pass rush, it ripped off the edge. And look, D'Anton Lynn got a job off that. He got a raise to go across town to USC based in large part by how well UCLA rushed the passer. Hawaii's going to give you a lot of opportunities to rush the passer. Do they have the guys who can rip off the edge this year? If not, it could be a little bit longer season in Westwood, because if you can't rush Hawaii,
No doubt about that. We were just talking about Chip Kelly, former NFL head coach, offensive mind, who was at UCLA as a head coach now for the Buckeyes. There's another former big name in the NFL who is now calling the shots for the offense for UCLA, Eric Bieniemy, who rose to fame being, Patrick Mahomes' offensive coordinator with Andy Reid. His star was once shined as bright as anybody in the NFL. Then he goes to the Washington Commanders, doesn't quite work out, and here he ends up out in Westwood here calling plays for the Bruins. Now, Ethan Garbers is not Patrick Mahomes. That will be quite challenging, and I don't see Travis Kelce or Tyreek Hill out there on the field either, but I'm genuinely curious to see how Bieniemy does kind of here. We're back on the college football sidelines. How effective is this offense? What style of system do they run? How does he deal with pairing back for college players? From going from the NFL where you're full-time. I'm just very curious to see how this offense looks with Eric Bieniemy as the offensive play caller.
Yeah, I think if you look at the situation with Deshaun Foster's first game in charge at UCLA, Eric Bieniemy's first game as the offensive coordinator, this is an opportunity, I think, for UCLA to get a win that I think it's going to need, because they do have a tough schedule for the rest of the season. And Bud, as you mentioned, this is a Hawaii team that if we don't see the Bruins really kind of take advantage of, there could be some serious concerns going forward. But one player I'm going to keep an eye out for, Danny, you said there's no Travis Kelce on this offense, and that's true, but there is a tight end that I know they're pretty high on, that I'm expecting to have a big game in this one. I think in Eric Bieniemy's offense, he's going to flourish. 6'4", 260 pounds, Moliki Matavao. That is a name I want you to remember. I think he's going to have a big performance in this game, and I think that's something that going forward in the Big Ten, the Bruins are going to need offensively to do damage.
Maybe one day he'll get $100 million podcast deal if he is the next Travis Kelce.
Look at that.
Maybe one day we will.
We can only.
They put us on CBS Sports Network.
Hope.
I mean, that's next up, right?
We're levels,
Yeah.
baby. We're so close to that $100 million podcast deal. We can be there too. Hey, now, are we sleeping on the Warriors here? Now, I think UCLA is probably going to win this game. And this is not a tried and true approach that has worked since we started to create week 0. But everything about the way that Hawaii treated the game against Delaware State says that they've got something saved up for a visit from UCLA. They went really, really deep into their bench. They went really, really deep into their rotations. They didn't really try to put the hammer down. The score was only 14-7 at halftime. They created more distance once the game went on. They are the far more talented team. But when you had a Hawaii team that, according to the odds makers, was favored to win by about 40 daggone points, and they clearly kept things a little bit tight, I've got to think that perhaps Timmy Chang's got everything planned. So, UCLA fans, watch out, because everything that we saw from Hawaii in week 0 says, yes, they got to break that first sweat. They got to break the ice on the season, but they were also maybe holding something back. So I'll be looking to see, is there anything that is unique? Is there anything that's creative? Is there anything that does confirm the fact that Hawaii can play much better than they did in week 0? They play the same way they did in week 0. UCLA wins by a bunch, but maybe, just maybe, there's something a brewing out there on the island. Well, coming up on the other side, we turn our attention to one of the biggest games of all week 1. It's a 5-day week 1 schedule. And when Penn State goes to West Virginia, the eyes of the country will be on that game. So what should those eyes be watching? We will take you inside the matchup, Cover 3 style, with a big game breakdown. All that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, getting you set for a big week 1 in the Big Ten. And one of the biggest matchups of the entire week is Penn State's visit to West Virginia. Now, this was a Penn State win when these two faced off last year, and it was in a season where Penn State kind of dominated a lot of the teams they played, not named Ohio State and Michigan, one of the closer of those other non-Ohio State and Michigan matchups. So let's start to get into it. Let's take it big game breakdown style. Danny, what aspect of this matchup stands out to you as something that you're interested in or that you think will be key in deciding the winner?
What's this Penn State offense look like, right? They bring in Andy Koltnicki from Kansas to revamp it, to bring some more firepower, some big play potential for Drew Aller, who was very good with the football last year. Statistically, the touchdown to interception ratio, it pops out to you. It's like, wow, that was a really strong year. But when you dove deeper in, there were a couple stat padding games where you're thinking, okay, I need to see a little bit more out of him. Now, he did have a good game against West Virginia last year, but also not only Koltnicki's offense, but what does Julian Fleming bring, the transfer from Ohio State? Is he that big play potential receiver outside that can get those big chunk yards and those 40, 50-yard plus touchdown, throws and plays through the air? So that's what I am most excited to look like. Drew Aller is a big physical, specimen at the quarterback position. Can they unleash him? Can he take it to another level? That's what I'm very curious to see in a hostile road environment there in Morgantown.
Tom, you were a long fan of what Andy Koltnicki and the Kansas offense was, and the ways that, they utilized lots of different aspects to create matchup advantages. Number one, do you think this translates? Does Penn State have the kind of personnel, and how do you think that some of that same success that the Jayhawks offense had could end up showing up in this matchup against West Virginia?
And I hope they have the personnel, because if Andy Koltnicki was able to do with the run game and offenses that he was able to do at Kansas and with the players he had at Buffalo, considering how Penn State has recruited in recent years, they better be good enough to take care of this. But I do think that we are going to see Penn State take a step forward offensively this year. And the one thing that I really think is going to matter in this matchup in particular is how effective that run game looks. I know going into last season, we were wondering if Drew Aller could be the guy to finally take that offense to the next level and give Penn State that kind of top tier quarterback. He didn't really live up to it, although he did post some good numbers. But I think in this matchup, it is going to be all about running the ball, because last season, Penn State ranked 86th nationally in explosive run rate. Compare that to Kansas, where Andy Koltnicki was last year with lesser talent, where they were 21st nationally. So will he be able to bring that to this offense to create more big plays, create more explosive plays, and just generally make life a lot easier on Drew Aller and a receiving core that I don't think has a true kind of alpha player? Because on the other side, if you look at West Virginia last season, They ranked 105th nationally in EPA allowed per rush. This was a defense that had trouble stopping the run. That is something I think that we might see some improvement in going into a new season, but I don't know how drastic of an improvement we'll be able to see. So I think Penn State needs to step forward and keep their foot on the gas on the ground.
Bud, when you think about some of the NFL talent that's been coming out of Penn State, even as recently as just last year, they also end up losing Manny Diaz. He goes to take the head coaching position at Duke. But I get a sneaking suspicion they still might be kind of salty on the defensive side. How do you see Penn State on the other side of the ball in terms of this matchup and then maybe even the season as a whole?
Yeah, so Chip, it'll be interesting with the new defense coordinator brought over from Indiana, right? They're a lot bigger on the defensive front. Manny Diaz was going to prefer kind of a lighter, more penetrating player. So this year they're going to be a little more two gap up front because they do have some guys who are in that kind of 3.25, 315 range at the defensive tackle position. I think Penn State is going to be really good off the edge with Deni Dennis Sutton and then also Abdul Carter coming off and ripping off the edge. I think they're really good at safety. They have some inexperience at corner. Now, the Penn State program does recruit corners extremely well, and West Virginia, at least last year, doesn't really have guys who scare you at the receiver position. So this could, in theory, be a good game for them to kind of ease into. Last year, they shut down that Mountaineer offense pretty well. And offensively for Penn State, I mean, they scored 38 last year, and that was an offense that over the course of the season wasn't good enough. Obviously, that's why they made a change there at offensive coordinator. I think if you're a Nittany Lions fan, the most encouraging thing that you've seen so far in the season is that Nevada installed basically the same offense that you did with far less personnel, had their starting quarterback miss the game, and then gave SMU a whole bunch of trouble for like 45 minutes in that ball game. So if I'm watching that as a Penn State fan, like maybe this is something we can install pretty quickly. They got great backs. I think this could work.
All right, so I know that Bud doesn't want us to give away the goods here on a Tuesday. We need to direct him to Thursday if you really want the picks. If you want the locks, you got to come join us 11 a.m. Eastern time, youtube.com/cover3 for our very best bets. But what about a prediction? What about a hunch? Let's go Tom, Bud, Danny. Give me your sense of how this game plays out. It can be as much of a game score or a total. If you want to be that specific, again, we'll save our very best bets for Thursday at 11 a.m. Eastern time. But as we sit here several days away from the game, Tom, how do you think this game plays out?
I mean, there are a couple interesting aspects to this matchup that I don't even think we've brought up yet. Like we talked about Penn State a lot, but on the other side of the ball, this is a West Virginia team that I just have a lot of question marks about. I know they were one of the bigger surprises last season, and going to Morgantown, I don't care who you are, it is always challenging, particularly if it's the first game of the season, because you know the crowd is going to be hyped. You know it's going to be a difficult environment for both the offense and defense to operate in. But I'm going to read a list of names here, okay? These are the quarterbacks that West Virginia beat last season. Phil Yurkovich, Baron Morton, who came in after Tyler Shuck got injured early in the Texas Tech game, Chandler Morris, John Reese Plumlee, Jake Retzlaff, a backup at Baylor, Emory Jones, and Sawyer Robertson. That was not exactly a murderer's row of QBs that West Virginia was going up against last season. So I'm not sure how good that team was despite its record. So while I think this is going to be a difficult situation for Penn State, I'm pretty confident the Nittany Lions are going to win this one. The only question will be, how good does that offense look with a new install and a new playbook? How quickly do they show? And the one concern I have, I mentioned how great the offense was for Andy Kotelnicki at Kansas. He had very mobile quarterbacks at Kansas. Drew Aller has a lot of talents. I don't know. He can move around. I don't consider him to be a dual threat type. So how different does it look with a quarterback who maybe isn't considered a rushing threat by most opposing defenses?
Tom, you mentioned quarterbacks, and I totally agree with you. Like the slate of quarterbacks that the Mountaineers faced was just that it was kind of hollow, right? But I want to focus on the West Virginia quarterback, Garrett Green. About a third of the way through the season, West Virginia made some pretty important changes last year, and they basically went all NBA style. All right, dunks and threes only. Can't read a defense, can't throw over the middle of the field. We don't care. All right, just go deep, throw screens, run around, make it work. We won 9 ball game. I'm serious. Like if you look at the passing chart, there's a huge big circle in the middle of the field they just don't throw to, and that's great coaching. if you know your guy can do some things, I think Neil Brown's a hell of a coach. I just think it's hard to get talent to Morgantown, West Virginia. But now everybody's got film on that, okay? And Penn State's got athletes that can run with you. Has Garrett Green expanded what he can do? Has this Mountaineer offense expanded what it can do around him so that you can't just key in on that stuff?
Under the definition for moxie in the Webster's dictionary, there is a picture of Garrett Green. I mean, that's what he's not the biggest dude. He's like 5'11". He just figures out a way to do it. I was watching video of him working out this offseason. He looks like his mechanics are pretty strong. I think this is a fourth quarter game. I think, and one thing that I learned personally the really hard way was when we go through the win-loss, we do our win totals, and you start just chalking up dubs. It's hard to win on the road in college football specifically. I think Penn State is the more talented team. I think they probably pull away, but I think this will be a tightly contested game in the fourth quarter where all of a sudden it's gut check time too. The other assumption is that Colton Icky, Tom, I think, hit it. He had a running quarterback. Drew Aller does not love to run. What does that look like? Timing, continuity, and can one player, Julian Fleming, is he the difference? We don't know yet. Like, there usually takes more than just one receiver to all of a sudden make a passing game work. So I think there's some question marks I can't wait to see from Penn State. And by the way, how many teams are in the Big 12 last year? How many teams last year? 14, right? Just remember, that was the calling card. I'm going to send this video to Neil Brown, Tom Fornelli, but I don't know, Bud, I don't know. That's all he needs. Neil Brown just needs a little bit of motivation, breakout season for him. Watch out.
Danny, I think the other reason to believe this will be close in the fourth quarter is that this offense, specifically like this Kansas version of this Kotelnicki offense, which Penn State's going to run, it operates at a really low tempo. I mean, there's a pretty good chance that both teams will only had like 5, 6, maybe 7 drives entering the fourth quarter. So it's almost impossible. It's like an NFL style tempo nowadays. If you're only getting 50 plays, it's hard to blow the doors off somebody if the teams are kind of fairly even on athletes. So I agree with you. I think it probably will be close for a good bit of the game.
I don't think they're even on athletes, and I don't think you need to blow the doors off them to cover a spread. Give me Penn State minus the points. I say they win this thing by double digits. Coming up on the other side, we got a standalone game on Sunday night. USC, LSU, it's in Las Vegas. We got new quarterbacks on both sides of the ball after departure of 2 Heisman Trophy winners. And we got a lot of intrigue for both of these teams in terms of whether they'll be a factor in their respective conferences. We'll go inside the matchup, USC and LSU, all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network, giving you a look at the week ahead in the Big Ten. And one of the Big Ten newcomers is in a massive neutral site showdown as USC will be squaring off with LSU in Allegiant Stadium in Las Vegas. Sunday night, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time is the kick. And so now, big game breakdown style, let's take a dive inside this matchup. So, Bud, why don't you take first stab at this? Clearly, we got new quarterbacks. We've got a lot of turnover, a new defensive coordinator for USC, new defensive coordinator for LSU, new offensive coordinator for LSU. I mean, I don't know how about this? How much can you take from last year? And if so, what to help inform you of what these teams might be this year, especially here in week 1?
Chip, that's a great question. I do think we can take some from last year, but there's also a lot we got to throw out the window, right? Caleb Williams is gone. Yep. Jaden Daniels is gone. So we have new quarterbacks on both sides. For me, it's all aboard the Nuss bus, baby. Garrett Nussmeier, I think, is probably going to be one of the best quarterbacks in college football. I've been driving that bus all offseason. We've been talking about how we're taking him to go first overall in the NFL draft, some of those crazy long shot odds. So I think Garrett Nussmeier might be really, really good. LSU has been high on this kid for 2 seasons. They let other high-profile prospects walk and transfer out. This is the guy they wanted to keep. When he got in against Georgia, when Daniels got hurt, he looked really good. He handled Wisconsin's complicated defense in the bowl game with ease. I think he's the goods. I also think LSU has the best offensive line in college football. Now, I think USC's got an improved defense because they have much better coaching now, and we'll see if Lincoln Riley is allowing these guys to be a little more physical in practice. But this is like the test of tests going up against this LSU offensive line in game 1. I would expect Nussmeier to have a lot of time to throw the ball, and if those new receivers for LSU step up, I think LSU will score a lot of points here.
Danny, do you think that Miller Moss and the USC offense have got the weapons to be able to go toe for toe if it does end up being a shootout?
I mean, Bud's on the Nuss bus. I'm on the Miller Moss motorcycle, baby. Let's go. I just hope it's not a moped. That's what I'm kind of worried about, because I mean, last December, remember when Caleb Williams is gone, there was a lot of speculation that Lincoln Riley was really going to hit the portal hard and looking for a quarterback. Will Howard's name comes to mind. That was the one target that he was after. And then Miller Moss goes out there in the bowl game, throws 6 touchdown passes and makes everybody forget about him. And then they only bring Jaden Maeva in from UNLV. So the one thing I do trust, Chip, is Lincoln Riley's ability to put up points, like no matter who's playing quarterback. Like, and if we were smart, we'd probably take futures on Miller Moss being a number 1 overall pick, because he's had several of those too, right? It's pretty remarkable the job that he's done as an offensive play caller. And yet there's still a piece of me that looks back at them wanting to go to the market at the end of spring practice, his kind of tentative nature on willing to, crown Miller Moss as the next guy. But I'm going to go back and just say, you know what? He selected the right guy. He's going to put up numbers. And if he doesn't, I don't think they'll hesitate to put Maeva in there if he struggles. But I do think that's the one thing I trust out of all these, is that USC will put up some points, because they have some offensive receiver too. Zachariah Branch, Mekhi Lemon, one of the receivers that Miller Moss told us about, is pulled over from the defensive side that he expects to have a big year. Like, I think they've got offensive weapons too. So I know it's predicted to be a shootout. I think USC will hold up their end of the bargain as well.
All right, so this leads me to my next question, Tom. If you have to bet on one of these defenses to get a stop, so if it's a shootout, they're trading paint, and now all of a sudden you're getting down into the fourth quarter, somebody's got to be able to get off the field between LSU and between USC. Which defense do you have more faith in being able to get that stop?
If my life is on the line here, I am a dead man, because I don't have faith in either one of these defenses to get the stop. Like, we have spent all offseason talking about how USC's defense has been awful, and Lincoln Riley made all these changes to try to fix the defense. But look at that graphic. Both of these teams played in games that averaged over 70 points per game last season, and it wasn't just because their offenses were good. It's because both of their defenses were terrible. They ranked 118th and 119th, respectively, in EPA allowed per snap on defense last season. They were awful. And I think one of the bigger surprises to me last year was, like, all off season last year, Bud was telling us, listen, this LSU secondary stinks. And Bud was right. The LSU secondary did stink. The bigger surprise to me was how little pass rush that this LSU defense had last year. They ranked 104th nationally in pressure rate on opposing quarterbacks. And I think with a Lincoln Riley offense, if you're not pressuring their quarterback, they're going to put up points. And as Bud mentioned too, with this LSU offense, if USC is not getting pressure on that, they're going to put up points. So if my life is on the line, trying to respect one of these defenses to get off the field and get the offense back to their ball, I am in a whole heck of a lot of trouble. But I'll just say LSU, I guess. I don't know.
You can name more elite individual defensive players, maybe that would be like, okay, if we need to get a stop, at least there's a Harold Perkins out there who could go be a superhuman. I mean, we seen him as a freshman go and win a game basically by himself. Maybe it could happen again. Okay, so there was a time where in our CBS Sports coach rankings, both of these head coaches were at the very top or near the very top. So let's throw this around with a little Tom, Bud, Danny. Who has the coaching edge between Lincoln Riley and Brian Kelly? Tom?
I'm going to go with Lincoln Riley just because, based off of Brian Kelly's comments about how much he loves his tight ends, that he's kind of going to go old school Notre Dame 2 tight end offense, and it's going to look a little boring. So I'll go with Lincoln Riley.
I'm going to go Brian Kelly slightly. I just think he has a bit longer track record than Lincoln does. Lincoln has, great highs, obviously. Like, they both, contended and made it, to the playoff or to the national championship game. I'm going to go Brian Kelly just very slightly.
Yeah, these teams are so similar, like mirror images of each other. If you look at the coaches kind of missing. Oh, yes. Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, you're saying that they're similar. I think this is the Spider-Man pointing meme. These teams are exactly the same.
Yes, absolutely. I'll go Brian Kelly. He's won at different places that I think are more challenging to win. brought, championships to Grand Valley State, won at Cincinnati, won at Notre Dame, had them on the verge of a championship. And then early one he's done at LSU has been super impressive. Not to say anything disparaging about Lincoln Riley, but he did inherit a really good situation at Oklahoma and did take over a place. And I know he said that it was a disaster, but he did happen to bring an incredible quarterback with him in Caleb Williams, who masked a lot of their issues the last couple of years. So I'll say the slight edge to Brian Kelly.
Oh, I'm gonna make it a rubber match. I'm not jumping all the way in on Brian Kelly here, but I do think that Lincoln Riley has a chance to either create an advantage or maybe even just ruin his quarterbacks. And here's what I mean by that. Because when I think about coaches who might be able to take the headset communication and make it a real advantage, I think about a coach like Lincoln Riley. Not that, as we've discussed on the Cover 3 podcast, he's going to see the defense and immediately be able to tell you where the 60-yard pass is, but that I trust his eyes as much as about any offensive mind in college football. So I am extending a little bit of, a little bit of faith that Miller Moss is going to be able to handle this. But I'm going to say Lincoln Riley, headset communication ends up being a difference. Okay, just like with the Penn State, West Virginia game, quick picks, quick thoughts. Danny, why don't you go first here?
This is a trickier one. I felt better about my West Virginia is going to keep it close because this truly is like both of these teams. There's such a variance of way the entire season could unfold. I'll say this. I think people love LSU a little bit too much, and they're forgetting that they did lose 2 first-round wide receivers, and that's still some production they have to replace. I'll say this is I think it's going to be a fun game. I'll say USC keeps it within the number, so I'll take USC in the points.
I'm tempted to agree with Danny here. I think LSU secondary is still pretty bad, and this is kind of a uniquely bad matchup for this LSU defense in some ways because USC can go 4 wide with Lane and Deuce Robinson and Mekhi Lemon and Zach Branch and make Harold Perkins, a cover guy who he was terrible at that last year. So I think LSU has better personnel, but I'm not really sure the matchup favors LSU. But that's only if USC can hold up at the line of scrimmage at all. Not really sure they can, so go ahead and give me the Tigers.
I have no idea who's going to win this football game. All I know is that the final score will be 55-52.
64.5 is preposterous. Anything under 70 is green light, go. We're going over 100%. That's the way that this is going. Let's go. All right. Coming up on the other side, we are very excited that the Big Ten championship game is going to be on CBS the first Saturday in December. Everyone's gathered around. Everyone's fired up for it. But who will be playing in Indianapolis? We're not just going to give you our picks. We're going to have to draft the participants in the Big Ten championship game. We'll get into all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, and we thought about just, offering our prediction for who's going to play in the Big Ten championship game. But then we realized that was going to be too easy. And this is week 1. This is when we get to work. So, gentlemen, here's the challenge. We're going to be drafting the Big Ten title game participants, which means that once a team is selected, you cannot select them. We'll do 2 rounds, snake draft. So at the end of this, we will all have 2 teams as a hypothetical Big Ten title game matchup. Danny Cannell, you are first on the clock. Who are you selecting for the Big Ten title game draft?
All right, I'll go. This might be different than my Big Ten championship winner that we've had before the season, but getting to the game, I think it's the Ducks. I think they have the easier path to get there. They have Ohio State coming to Eugene. I'd rather go to Michigan this year than have to go to Penn State, which Ohio State does. So give me the Ducks with the number 1 pick.
That is absurd. You and Sam Bowie over there just out here leaving Michael Jordan for me to jump. Thank you. I will take the Ohio State Buckeyes because I just need them to get there. This team has more talent than everyone else in the conference. This team has the motivation of falling to your rival 3 straight years in a row, of not making the Big Ten title game 3 straight years in a row. Are they going to slip up along the way? Maybe once. I don't think it'll happen twice. Give me Ohio State, number 2.
Who determined the order for this? Because I feel like Bud and I are really drawing the short end of the stick, getting picks 3 and 4, because you're both able to take the clear and obvious choices. And now I'm stuck with a spot where, do I want to take Penn State or do I want to take Michigan? Because, like, on the one hand, I kind of like Michigan more, but on the other hand, I think I kind of want to stick Bud with Michigan. So I don't know what to do here. At the end of the day, I think I'm going to take the Wolverines. They are the reigning national champions, and I know that there are questions on the offensive side of the ball. We still don't know who their starting quarterback is. The offensive line has problems, but defensively, this team is going to be elite. It will be one of the best units in the country. I think that gives me a pretty high floor. So if we're just picking teams to get to Indianapolis, give me the Wolverines.
Look, totally going to file a grievance over Danny not taking Ohio State with number 1. Like that gives Chip a crazy advantage here. But for my 2, since I'm here at the turn, I'm going to go with Penn State. I do think the offense will be legitimately improved with Andy Kotelnicki, the new OC. I really like what they're doing on defense. I think they've got some pretty special defensive personnel. And if those young corners step up, they could actually be as good as Michigan's defense. So we'll see if they can. But I like that pick. And here, with the going away of divisions, right? That makes a lot of these former Big Ten West teams, they have a lot harder schedule than they used to. I don't really expect many of those Big Ten West teams to make it to the conference championship all that often. But somebody forgot to tell the Big Ten office to remove Iowa's old Big Ten West schedule. They still have the easiest schedule in the conference by a mile. I mean, like, you could see a couple little things, like maybe Michigan's or Nebraska's freshman quarterback not be all that good. Maybe Wisconsin doesn't have a great offense or something. For Iowa to be favored in all but that game at Columbus. And we could all be sitting here come December saying, guys, Iowa is 8-1 in the league. They're going back to the Big Ten title game. So give me those Hawkeyes with an improved offense, I guess, but they'll still play really great defense.
You know, if this was like an actual NFL draft, I would desperately be trying to trade down right now, because I feel like the team I want at this point, I could get a few picks down the road, because I think that's the kind of thing when it looks at the Big Ten is in general this season. There are 4 teams at the top, clearly. The first 4 teams we took in this draft, I think, are the cream of the crop. They're the ones we mostly all expect to be playing in this game. After that, like, there's a lot of different teams who can take advantage of easy schedules, like Iowa, Bud's pick, or could just have a surprise season and reach Indianapolis. I guess we talked about them earlier. We talked about how good the offense is going to be, and I think that in this league, having an elite offense could provide a pretty significant advantage. Give me the USC Trojans. So I guess I've got a Michigan-USC title game matchup.
Oh, Chip's mad because not everybody's going to allow the obvious pick to fall
Chip
to him
doesn't get to take Ohio State
in a 2-round draft.
Oh.
I could have been sitting here with Ohio State USC. I could have been sitting here with a potential Big Ten title matchup. Now I've got to go upside. Now I've got to go vibes. Now, and who is vibier than Matt Rule? Like, who is more just cruising on vibes than Mr. 5 Big Ten teams in the college football playoff every year because you play in every time zone in different weather? Like, who is more dialed into just figuring it out and making it happen? So I'll go with the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Dylan Raiola shows up. He's everything that you could imagine. And let's say that they maybe even, threaten Ohio State in game 1. Find their way back for a rematch in Indianapolis. So give me Nebraska.
Man, I was hoping to get Nebraska to slingshot all the way back to me, see if they'd fall in my lap. By the way, I don't think I got Sam Bowie. I think I got Hakeem Olajuwon, who went number 1 overall in that Michael Jordan draft class. For my 8th and final pick, give me Luke Fickell. Big step forward in year 2. I mean, we're getting down here. There is a pretty big gap in those top 4 and the rest. But what if we see a resurgence of Tyler Van Dyke that we saw his first year when Rhett Lashley was calling the plays for the Miami Hurricanes, or the version that we saw last year against Texas A&M that threw 5 touchdowns? Boy, I love that blue blood matchup. Give me Wisconsin back in the Big Ten championship game. I know the schedule is an absolute gauntlet, but maybe there's just a bloodbath, and a lot of these teams beat each other up as well. And Wisconsin is one of the last ones remaining.
All right, let's recap everyone's picks here in our Big Ten title game draft. So Danny Cannell has a matchup of Oregon against Wisconsin. Picking from the 2 spot, I'm going to give you Ohio State against Nebraska. Tom at 3 has Michigan going up against USC. Hey, that's a game you can see on CBS on September 21st. And then Bud at the 4-5 spot at the turn has Penn State going up against Iowa. That's it. Those are your Big Ten title contenders, and those are the order based on our Cover 3 snake draft in the way we think it could play out. Well, coming up on the other side, we did it last week, and I kind of like the way that it flows. So before we get out of here, we're going to give you one player to watch for the weekend, one pick to click, all that and more next. Back here on the Cover 3 podcast, live on CBS Sports Network. Well, last week, as we were looking ahead to week 0, we finished with one player to keep your eye on. Bud Elliott gave you RJ Maryland, and he saved SMU from starting 0-1. So, Bud, why don't you get us started? Who's the one player who you've got your eyes on here in week 1?
Let's go. Pick to click, right? So the former leader of that Ohio wagon, Curtis Rourke, transfers to Indiana. Indiana's bringing in that JMU offense. Quarterback coach Tino Sinceri has had the Conference Player of the Year 2 years in a row. I don't quite think Curtis Rourke's going to make it 3 in the Big Ten, but I do think Indiana's going to get off to a nice start with Curtis Rourke playing quarterback for them.
You know, I was watching the documentary on Netflix on Connor Stallions, and one of the things that I was reminded of, yes, all of the stealing that was taking place, but also Donovan Edwards toting the rock in the national championship game, not 1 but 2 touchdowns. To go with that, also his 200-yard plus performance against Ohio State a couple of years ago. Now he's the featured back for the Wolverines against Fresno State. We don't know who the quarterback is going to be. We think it's going to be Alex Orji. We don't know how he's going to look, but we know Donovan Edwards is going to look good, and he's going to look big, and he's going to have a big night. So I got my eye on him.
Danny's rooting on his fantasy team here on the show right now. I'm going to go with another player from the state of Michigan. I'm going to take Michigan State quarterback Aiden Childs. This is the first game of the Jonathan Smith era in East Lansing with the Spartans. He brought Aiden Childs with him from Oregon State. And I look at this matchup against Florida Atlantic. Danny, I know you're a big Florida Atlantic guy. You gave him the pregame pump-up speech a couple weeks ago, but you also spend your entire offseason pumping up Florida State, and we saw what happened in their first game. I think Aiden Childs is going to have a huge game against the Owls and announce himself as one of the premier talents in the Big Ten.
Do we need to get a Connor Stallions jar for Danny? You know, like you know, put in $1 every single time, because I feel like this isn't just going to be this week. I feel like we need a Connor Stallions jar, maybe for the season.
Can he also?
And we'll go to St. Jude's at the end of the season, right?
Yes.
Is that fair?
We can do it for charity.
That could redeem him for the beard bet, right?
Yes,
that's a good call.
A Connor Stallions jar to redeem him for the beard bet. That is absolutely perfect. Okay, I'm going to go with Dylan Raiola. Nebraska is playing UTEP. There is going to be so many opportunities for Nebraska to be able to set up the kind of shot plays that they had in the spring game. Because what did we see in the spring game? We saw a lot of Nebraska making things look easy for the freshman quarterback. And I think that the Miners do not have the players to be able to keep up here. And there is going to be every bit of motivation for this new offensive staff to be able to make sure that he is comfortable all along the way. Listen, week 1 is coming up. It'll be here before you know it. So if you want to get even more of the Cover 3 podcast, Wednesday, 11 a.m. Eastern time, we're going to be giving you our big game breakdowns, just like today, but for even more from the week 1 slate. Then on Thursday, our very best bets for week 1. You can find it all. Come hang out 11 a.m. Eastern time at youtube.com/cover3 or download the Cover 3 podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Gentlemen, thank you very much.